Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So by our monastic calendar, in this tradition, this is the new moon of December. And in many parts of the Buddhist world, the lunar days are considered, sometimes referred to in the English translation as holy day or something along those lines. A bit like a Sunday is perhaps for the Christian tradition, and other days of the week for other faiths. And what's different following the lunar calendar is that the day of the week changes. So the full moon, which was 15 days ago, was on a Friday night. The next full moon will be on Sunday night. And so it's a shifting. So it's a time to gather together. This morning, the monastic community reaffirmed our training rules, our training precepts, and then in our particular branch of tradition, we're gathering together at some point in the day or night to reflect on Dhamma, to meditate together. And tonight we'll be having a vigil until midnight. This is the plan. One theme that's been kind of rumbling around my own mind for some weeks, on and off, has been around, well, also because of contact with other people, both living here in the monastery and also people maybe visiting or that I've had contact with by phone, is around how to deal with things that we might find offensive, or things that where we have perception of anger in ourselves, anger arising, or anger, somebody else, what we perceive as anger in them. Maybe something is said. Typically it's through speech, often through acts of body, but probably safe to say generally through speech. Somebody, maybe we have a contact with somebody and we find it offensive or irritating, hurtful. Somebody says something or that we perceive as being off, and then anger can quite easily arise. And I'm certainly no psychologist. I'm not going to pretend to know a lot about it, but I consider, especially reflecting on the Buddhist teachings, that anger is one of the root or core emotions in living beings. very, very natural. If we feel threatened, I'm just reflecting on it myself this afternoon. Is when does anger arise in me? So if I feel it's kind of boils down to feeling threatened, and could be physical, but more often than not, it's a threat towards our sense of self, our sense of worth, our sense of rightness. The way we perceive the world. And so, it's just so common. In fact, I received a message from somebody recently who spoke about how their meditation practice has been really helping them to hold anger when it arises, not in a squashing way, in a repressive way, but how can they deal with that anger when it does arise, and the fact that through their practices that the anger has been reducing, the incidences, the opportunities, or the expressions of that anger have greatly reduced through their own wholesome efforts. And living in community this size, it's not a huge community, it's not a tiny community. It's right now we're approximately 30, 35 people, more or less, living here. We've got lots of space. We're very privileged at this monastery, living out in the countryside. We've got so much here, so much space. But we have contact with each other. We don't live in isolation. Apart from different times of the year, we might have some retreat. And even then, we might have some contact. So coming up in contact with people, different nationalities, different cultures, different ages, genders, cultural conditioning, family conditioning. And so it's entirely possible that we bump up against attitudes or opinions, views that are, vastly different from our own. And something drew us to this place, each and every one of us, no matter what kind of our commitment is to being here, whether we're have come to offer at least a couple of months of support, as the lay support team has been doing and does, or a live-in lay steward, or whether we're part of the monastic community, whether we made a 1-year commitment, whether we're here for longer commitments. We all chose to be here, and coming from these different places and our different way of being, our different personalities, temperaments. And we're here to realize a peaceful heart, to develop that unshakable, peaceful heart. And so we have this container of our precepts as a minimum, and it's the 8 precepts, in which I, quite frankly, find profound that we can do that, live on 8 precepts. That's a huge, wonderful thing, in my opinion. It has all the ethical content that we need to walk this spiritual path. And then, of course, the monastic community, then as it goes up to 10 precepts, and so on and so forth. But yeah, we're going to have contact with people, and sometimes things can just be a very different way that somebody's viewing the world or their experience. This is absolutely normal, and I find in spiritual life incredibly helpful. I find it very helpful to not be living in a monoculture, a mono view. Can you imagine if everybody, all of us all had the exact same views and opinions? Because the way I see it, when we encounter other ways of seeing things, that can also help us to review how we hold things. Oh, that's a different way to look at that, because it's quite easy for us to feel right. You know, why would I hold on to a view that I don't think is right? But is it? Because right is, more often than not, is very relative. Right can often just be just as ephemeral as anything else. What's right today might not be right tomorrow. And here again, speaking from experience, so often when I've been, I use the expression spun out, psychologically, emotionally, mentally spun out by some contact or event. It's not peaceful. It's really not peaceful. It is not wanted. And I have in the past seen how many times I wasn't able to hold it in a way that was spacious and could accommodate, and to let that mental or emotional state pass through unhindered. I hindered it greatly by making more stories or whatever, or lashing out. And what's been coming to mind recently in some conversations is this sutta. It's in the Samyutta Nikaya, I believe. Sutta that comes to mind, and it's the Akosa Sutta. And I'll just give a brief rundown on as I remember it. The setting takes place at the bamboo grove in Rajgir, India. And Buddha was living in the bamboo grove with other samanas, other religious seekers, other part of his group at that time that had gathered. And a Brahmin had recently gone forth, had joined the Sangha. And this Brahmin was from a particular clan, and another one of his clansmen, another Brahmin, came to see the Buddha, and basically to complain, saying, and I am paraphrasing here, he complained to the Buddha about the clansman joining, and this Brahmin was angry and said some unkind things to the Buddha, or spoken in unkind ways. And so the Buddha, he questioned the Brahmin. And here again I'm paraphrasing, not quoting exactly from the sutta, but he says, dear Brahmin, when you have guests, do you have people visit you, and either family or friends or associates, and if they come to visit you, do you ever offer them refreshments, food or drink? And Brahman replies, yes, of course I do. Yeah, I do. I offer from time to time, when people come, yes, I do offer those refreshments. And the Buddha says, well, if they don't take those refreshments, if they don't consume them or take them, who do those refreshments belong to? And the Brahmin says, well, of course they belong to me. They are mine. And he says, this is the same as your anger. He says, I don't take it, I don't accept it, so therefore it belongs to you. This is yours. And the Brahmin reacted very positively to this. He took it in the spirit in which the Buddha meant. And it wasn't the Buddha wasn't trying to embarrass, the way I read it, he wasn't trying to embarrass this person. He was trying to point something out. And in fact, the Brahmin was so inspired that he ended up joining the monkhood. And near the end of the sutta it says, and then sometime later, and not long after, this Brahmin realized Nibbana. So he took it in the spirit that Buddha meant. It was so not picking up the anger was not just for the Buddha to be peaceful, but the Buddha speaks in the sutta about how when we remain calm, when we don't lash out or react or respond in unskillful ways, expressing that anger is that it's not just for our well-being, it's for the well-being of the other person or people. So it's a double gift. It's a double gift because I think we've all found, I think it's pretty safe to say that we've all found that if we have maybe lost mindfulness and lashed out in some way, spoken out unskillfully, as a response to what we perceive as something offensive. Does it work? Does that work? Does it help? Ultimately, it might momentarily feel good. I'm not going to let them say that to me. I'm not going to let that go responded to. How dare they? But it can often just become this endless back and forth, just energy bouncing off of each other. But I want to emphasize again that that when we can, if we do develop this, or when we do develop this skill of the heart and skill of the mind and skill of the mouth, to not react, to not lash out, that this is, it's not to try and prove ourselves better than another person, or embarrass them, or I don't know. Yeah, those are the two main things. It's to create well-being in us and others. It's for our well-being, for their well-being, and for the well-being of all beings that are nearby. To speak about things is quite easy in so many ways. Doing it that's a different story. It takes, I find it, great mindfulness, discernment, self-awareness. So what is it? Why do we sit in meditation? Why do we do walking meditation? Why do we contemplate Dhammas? Why do we get tuned into our inner world? So that we have that mindfulness. Then when just incidents in life come and go, then we see, we know. Oh. So let's say something is said to us, we perceive it as being, as I said earlier, that I use the word offensive. Yeah. When our mindfulness is strong enough, clear enough to see that arising, to see those feelings arise from that, whatever those feelings are, if they're negative. This is a time. This is where all this practice is leading. The ability to hold and experience things calmly. But what do we do when things don't go that way? Because this is a practice, and it's a gradual path. One of the things I've spoken about recently, just a bit more privately, is how do we respond in the aftermath of mistakes? Mistakes are just misjudgments, misjudged exchanges or actions. More and more, that's what really interests me, because as living beings, human beings, we mess up, either through intentional acts, as I used a word a minute ago, through misjudging things and doing an unintentional act which was off, which was unskillful, or making a mistake through misjudgment or heedlessness. What do we do? How do we respond, both outwardly and inwardly? So the outward expression is around social contact, communal contact with other beings. And then the inner response. So if we only work on the outer, but then don't do the inner work, maybe we smooth things over in the appropriate way, or apologize, or get feedback on that. There's various things, aspects of that. And maybe, make amends in all the right ways. But if we don't do the inner work to go along with that, A, it's a lost opportunity, and B, where does that leave us? Where does that leave us in our emotional, mental world? Because that's where we suffer. That's where we experience dukkha. So to be able to reflect on feelings, emotions, thoughts, to view them through the eyes of Dhamma, to recognize the dukkha element, the unsatisfactory element of that. To see the arising and passing away, the ceasing of those things, to see their anicca, impermanent, transient nature. And then to also see, are we taking ownership of those things? Yes, take responsibility, but are we owning that? Are we creating an identity around that? That anatta, the not-self nature, and these three key elements of the Buddha's teachings, the things he realized in his awakening. So one of the things that I've heard a lot over, in my life, especially, in particular since taking up Buddhist practices, the expression of, "Oh, I'm an angry person. That's my nature." So many people, I am an angry person. The Buddha reframes this. He gets us not just to believe what he's saying, he doesn't want that, but he does reframe it to look at the not-self nature. Is it, are you an angry person, or are you a person experiencing anger? Are you a person who has a habit of experiencing and expressing anger? This habitual tendency. And the way I look at that is that that's a big difference between being, I am an angry person, or I am a person who has a habit. Habits are formed. I think we all know that. We form our habits through time, through conditioning. And we can form new habits. We can form a habit that doesn't respond to those inner impulses. Doesn't respond and react to old stimulus and habitual responses to things. So even if that old habitual impulse arises through mindfulness, awareness, self-awareness, we quickly, and through that same mindfulness, I'm not going to pick this up. I'm not going to respond to this in my old habitual way. So that is the new habit of non-response to an old habit. This is just using words to reflect on this, but this is the way I see currently. And then as that new habit becomes dominant, old habit gets no traction, almost no traction. You just see it. And as I heard one of our dear elders say, "Oh yeah, things come up from long ago, 50 plus years ago, and maybe it gets triggered, but I don't give it anything. I don't give it any attention. It's just a fleeting impulse." So it's not just, as I was speaking about this sutta several minutes ago, it's not just about picking up other people's energy, or in that case, in the sutta, it was anger, but we can change it to another maybe negative emotion or mind state. So not just others, but to not pick up our own negative responses. Those things in our inner world which are rumbling around, the unwanted emotions, the unwanted thoughts, feelings. And do we need to pick those up? Or can we, through this awareness, this mindfulness, See the arising, see the lingering, see the passing away. Let it move, let it pass through, let it shift. Or I know sometimes I use the expression let it wash through consciousness. Wash through consciousness. Just passing. Whatever speed, slow or quick, medium, it's moving. It wasn't always there, and it won't always be there. Give it space. So I've been focusing on negative emotions, the things that we would put into the negative spectrum, but the same dynamic, especially around what I was just speaking about, I reflect the same way on the positive things that we tend to latch onto and cling to and grasp at. Because that too is dukkha, that too is unsatisfactory. Trying to hang on to the good, cling to it. It's that clinging, that latching onto. It's not the cultivating of it. It's not the energy of sustaining it, because if one puts in that energy of cultivating and sustaining with clear awareness, then the dukkha won't arise. There's real clear awareness of what we're doing. But it's when we don't quite have that, getting things the way we want them, getting things to be set up the way we want. And then if that does actually happen, we get things all set up, and we can do this in community life. We can kind of get it sorted out, or we think we have, and then we don't want it to change, and then it changes. So if we're clinging to that sort of rightness, that sort of orderliness according to our own likes and dislikes, our own proclivities, and this is dukkha. Or if we just, okay, things are set up, okay, set up in a good way. I didn't sort of wangle my way into this situation. It came about in a wholesome way through wholesome impulses and exchanges. Yeah, right now, sweet moment. Things are just right. And maybe we even put in wholesome energy into sustaining that, no problem. But if we start going through wholesome actions, wholesome speech, unwholesome actions, unwholesome speech, kind of, right? I used that word a minute ago, wangling things to get what we want, get things, and to keep it that way. This is something that we should look at, and we should notice this, take notice of this, and challenge that would be my suggestion. So in community life like this, it's we could try to get the chore that we might want or that we like, or hang on to that chore, or get out of the chore that we don't want, or that's just one example. We go to the work meeting and try and get the work job from the work monk or work nun that we want. If we do it with wholesome intent, no problem. But if it's based on preference and avoidance of doing things we don't want, it's not evil, that's for sure. But in terms of Dhamma and our original reason for coming here, to realize the peaceful heart, to realize letting go, to realize this unshakability, a peace that's not based on conditions, a peace that can, you got this job, in the morning, I can be peaceful. Boy, this is not what I want to do, but I'm at peace. Oh, I've got this chore for the next 6 weeks. Yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay. So that our life is not based on getting what we want. So whether we're inside the monastery or outside the monastery, all of these dynamics are they're possibilities. They're really, really normal. It's just day-to-day life, no matter where we live. And so much of the world just keeps hammering away at getting us to want things and to fulfill that desire and to keep that happiness, quote unquote, that we will get from getting this, getting that, whether it's an object or a job or a status or whatever. It's promoting. I see it as promoting discontent. And the great spiritual teachers were pointing at promoting contentment. Contentment with the present moment. And then expand that out. That doesn't mean that we just, okay, I'm not going to put in any more effort to improve things if they could use improvement, look after things. But we do it with contentedness. So right now, this is the way it is. It could be improved upon. Put in that effort, but with mindfulness, without putting unrealistic time frames on things. And this is where patience folds in. So just before wrapping up these thoughts, just to go back again to this Akosa Sutta, pointing to the example, the Buddha not accepting, not picking up, not taking on the anger of this Brahman. Leaving it be. And then, if we're on the other end of it, if we're the person, I suppose we could call it the aggressor. So if we make that mistake, can we learn the way this Brahman did? Can we take that example of somebody else's inner stability, skillfulness? Can we take that example in a wholesome way, or do we lash out even more because the other person didn't react? Because the Brahman took it in the spirit that the Buddha meant, and the Brahman benefited. Let go of that, was inspired by that, didn't grasp at his own self-importance or righteousness. And we can all learn from these things, and then, as I said later on in this reflection, these are outward expressions of these things, outward dynamics. What about our inner? Can we not pick up things that appear in our inner world that are more self-created? Can we just leave them be and not pick them up? And therefore, they're not ours. This can really help us start to see the not-self nature of all compounded things. peaceful. We can be at ease and at peace with things that aren't typically considered peaceful. We can give space. We can have an unshakability. And then lastly, as a reminder, what do we do when we do, through lack of mindfulness or maybe that inner skill, how do we deal with the aftermath of either outward exchanges or inner exchanges? Do we, if it's all inner and we just berating ourselves, beating ourselves up over, maybe, oh, there I go again, thinking about this, thinking about that. Or if it's a more outward thing to do directly with another person, how do we deal with that? So I just wanted to remind us all of those three particular points that I've reflected on in this little talk this evening. So I'll close here. So.